Welcome back to Club News. The club industry is in a constant state of change, but change doesn't always have to be a bad thing, especially when it comes to giving your club a new look. Today we're joined by Greg Brandtman, Senior Partner of Mitchell Brandtman, 5D Quantity Surveyors, to discuss what clubs should consider when looking at a renovation or a new project and what benefits a fresh look or offering can bring. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So firstly, when a club board or management is looking at a club project or renovation, what are the responsibilities of the directors in that project?
Well, the first and foremost responsibility of directors is to look after the members' interests. And in saying that, before they can step out in a program of redevelopment of their premises, someone on the board, and generally the whole board, must recognise that there's a need for change and why that need for change exists. Clubs are a business, and for a business to run effectively, of course, it needs the right tools. And the procurement, renovations and the procurement process give managers the right tools to run their clubs properly.
How would you recommend clubs go about the procurement process?
Look, in essence, it's a three-part exercise. Firstly, there's once it's recognised that there is a need, there's a preliminary appraisal should be undertaken, and this looks at cash flow requirements, the need for the change, obviously information from members as to what they actually want. But this process will set up the financial feasibility and the business model, and then you move into the second stage, which is more of a detailed appraisal. This is where you get designers in to look at what can be done. You consider master planning exercises. So if there's if there's a view that the premises is going to be used for the next 10 years, well, what extensions can we do? How can we build this depending on funds? And you can break your renovation exercise up into a number of different parts. And in part of that process is obviously a need to budget efficiently and correctly so that the financial targets can be adequately met.
What about engaging a head contractor, and what should clubs consider when suggesting tenderers?
Look, if we're part of this process, it's certainly true that clubs should approach, or through people like us, approach tenderers who are experienced in the club industry. And it's not only the contractors that need the experience, it's the designers as well. But people that aren't involved in the club industry as contractors often get a bit lost in the need for proper screening and protection, because they're generally working in an existing facility that has patrons coming in and out.
Yeah, they don't quite know the peculiarities of the club space.
Experience really does count.
What benefits then does a quantity surveyor bring to a project?
Well, quantity surveyors I guess essentially are number crunchers, and any development such as what clubs are going to undertake revolves around how much money they can spend and how to spend that money wisely. So quantity surveyors are in a position where they have a knowledge of every other consultant, including architects and engineers for services and fire and all that sort of information that is absolutely essential for a correct budget to be put together.
Bottom line does matter most. So once the club has gone through all those steps that you've mentioned with tenders and contractors, quantity surveyors and so forth, where did they go to from there?
Well, the final stage is of course procurement, and there are a number of contracting methods that can be used, either design construct or a lump sum contract or construction management. Now, of those three approaches, design construct is the most popular, and because most club jobs are refurb projects or have certainly a large amount of refurb, that is the way of least risk for club boards to follow. That doesn't mean that you take any of these matters lightly, though. Correct budgeting up front before you even talk to a builder is most essential. You've got to get your aims, get your targets. You know, where do you want to be with your business in the next 5 years? It's really, really important.
What challenges can a club face when both planning and then executing these changes to their premises, whether it be a refurb or a new build?
Look, providing they do their homework up front, everything falls into place. Certainly Clubs New South Wales have a brochure out on best practice for major works, and I would encourage any club who's thinking about some refurbishment work or a new building to have a look at those guidelines, because they are kind of appropriate, and I think they're well structured so people can understand how the whole process can fall together. But procurement certainly should be left to the experts in the field that can best manage process and give the club the best value for money and the best financial outcome.
So that's where the quantity surveyors come in.
Correct.
How do you go about, when you meet with club representatives, how do you go about making sure that that their satisfaction, the project is completed to their satisfaction?
Look, certainly we encourage club boards to get involved with people like us sooner than later, simply because I think they get a more effective service. But in saying that, your quantity surveyor can come into the process anywhere between inception to when you wish to sign a contract, and more often than not these days we are brought in fairly early, certainly in the preliminary appraisal section.
Obviously that's how you work with the club, but it sounds like a quantity surveyor works with a lot of other service professionals to get the best outcome for the project. How do you work with them to achieve those outcomes?
Any procurement process has got to be a team effort. Now, we're in a position where we work with all the other consultants and go into a lot of detail with them in what solutions they've come up with as far as design is concerned, and what the cost ramifications of that is. So it's the quantity surveyor's role to try and guide the process. Generally speaking, for 4 out of 5 projects that we do these days, we at least get appointed by the club as a superintendent, so we act as the board's eyes and ears during the procurement process as a whole. But certainly during construction, on a D&C type contract, obviously you can't have the contractor paying his own or recommending to pay his own progress claims. So the quantity survey is quite important. And when there's funding involved, quantity surveyors are on panels with the various funding institutions, and we have to do a due diligence up front, and we've got to authorise all the loans, all the loan draws, and that's quite an intense process, and it's got to be done right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Greg.
My pleasure.
Been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.